Among other things, the Midwestern Regional Climate Center is a repository for historical weather data, largely temperature and precipitation data, starting yesterday and going back to the early 1800s. As part of the Climate Data Modernization Program, data have been inventoried from about 4,000 stations. Then data have been keyed, about 450 stations, and quality controlled. The quality control, we developed the tools at the Midwestern Climate Center, and we are doing the quality controlling. These data were imaged. This is an example of one of the forms. There were about 20 forms, all being modified over time, and about as many ways to fill it out as there were observers and instruments. As I said, about 450 stations have been keyed, and about 300 have been quality controlled, and these are available from us. These data were first taken by surgeons in Army forts, and then in 1872, sergeants in the Signal Corps began taking the observations. They were also taken by volunteer weather observers for the Smithsonian Institute. They started shortly after Illinois became a state. You can see there were a dip in number of observations during the Civil War, and then we went into the networks went into the Weather Service in 1892. This is the distribution of stations across the country. The warmer colors are stations that were the longest and were the ones that started earliest. These 450 stations are the longest and most complete of the stations available. For the hydrologists, we also digitized water data, river height, and river change. Here is the stations in Illinois, and there were also water stations in Illinois. What I would like to do next is present 3 different examples of uses of these data, so you can get an idea of how these data might be used. The first is to look at the placement of a 1954 heat wave in the context of the historical data. This heat wave was prolonged and widespread. There were more than 80 days during that summer in St. Louis with more than 90-degree temperatures, and more than 20 days with 100-degree temperatures. You can see it was widespread. It was one of the 1, 2, or 3 worst heat waves in the Midwest. And it was during that period Illinois reached 117 degrees. These are stations that were used to look at, to place this in the historical context. We had 165 years of data total. One of the stations in St. Louis was from 1845 to 1892. You can see that there, throughout these 165 years, there have been a number of warm periods, but the 1930s and the 50s are still paramount. A second example is of a cold wave, and from December of 1836. The impacts in Illinois were quite severe, largely because of the timing of this event. Early in the morning of this event, at 7 a.m., temperatures were balmy in Illinois, well above freezing. By 2 p.m. in the afternoon, temperatures were close to 0, and literally there were reports of men who were frozen to their saddles from freezing precipitation. There were about 38 stations used in documenting the march of this cold wave across the eastern United States. The last example is of Laura Ingalls Wilder. It was a verification of the winter that she described in her book, and Barbara Mace found that she did a pretty good job of actually describing that winter, and those results were relayed at the Laurapalooza conference. If these data might complement one of your studies, contact us at the Midwestern Regional Climate Center. The data are free to all those with a .edu web address. Thank you.